question is why? Why don't men want women to pursue higher learning or learning, period? Why is there such a big push to prevent women from educating themselves and sharing their knowledge with others? It's because we're in a mating crisis.
We need to stop normalizing women getting an education. Education is literally ruining our sisters. Most of them don't even know how to run a household. Most of them aren't marriage material. Most of them are becoming the men that they want to marry. They study to become a doctor or
Today, in Kabul, a female cat has more freedoms than a woman. A squirrel has more rights than a girl in Afghanistan today because the public parks have been closed to women and girls. A bird may sing in Kabul, but a girl may not, and a woman may not in public.
Dr. D is laying there. She had been essayed, and but why?
Hey bestie, welcome to the Spoiled Girly Support Group podcast where we talk about how to get that bag while also securing your own bag. I'm your host Elle, and let's get into it. On today's episode, we are talking about the war on women's education and how this is a slippery slope to erasing women from public life so that they can once again be shackled by their private lives managed solely by men. We're also talking about the very suspicious reason why we are seeing a rise in anti-women's education sentiment today, and the reason is pretty gross, but not surprising at all. And today's class was spurred by the Kolkata case on a female doctor in India who was found lifeless in a hospital lecture room after multiple men committed depraved acts against her. And if you still think that this only happens over there, not here, we will also cover the Antarctica case, which made headlines earlier this year and is currently under US Congressional investigation. And it is a stone cold reality check for all of us who think that these issues don't apply to us because we live in a quote unquote free society. And we will also talk about the current ban on women's education and public speech in Afghanistan to illustrate how this is the end game for any society condemning the education of women and harassing women from pursuing their education. Now, all these topics, they seem loosely related and they may even come across as isolated cases, but no, they're all connected because any society that condemns women's education, impedes it, and prohibits it is a slippery slope to a society that silences women and erases women's participation in public life so that women can be consumed by men in their private lives. Now we have a lot to cover, but before we get into it, I need you to hit the like, subscribe, and the notification bell so you never miss a Spoiled Girly episode. With that being said, let's get into it. Now, I thought it was a pretty interesting coincidence that when the Kolkata murder case was all over the news, a video of some man preaching to his Muslim brothers about how women shouldn't be educated was also making the viral rounds. Now, the TikTok video has been deleted because obviously it's very harmful content, but basically the man was saying that education is ruining our sisters. That because of education, most women don't know how to run a household, they're not marriage material, and are becoming the men that they want to marry. And this video really caught my attention, and it made me look deeper into the rise of anti-women's education sentiments. And what I found was alarming. And leading the charge is Afghanistan. So the Taliban's return to power around 2021, it saw girls being banned from schools above year 6. And on March 21st, 2022, they promised to reopen all the schools, but 2 days later, while the girls were literally getting ready for school, the authorities, they retracted the decision and they restricted girls over the age of 12 from attending state-run schools. The Ministry of Education stated that the closure would only be temporary and that schools would be reopened once these institutions put in place policies that would, quote unquote, ensure compliance with the principles of Islamic law and Afghan culture. 6 months later, there existed no plan to reopen secondary schools, and the government actually issued a new edict which banned girls and young women in Afghanistan from higher education.
I'm devastated by the news of ban on university education for Afghan women. But I'm not shocked. Girls have been prohibited from secondary schools for the last 1.5 years. And we have been doing our advocacy. We are calling for a response from our leaders that they must take it seriously, because we always feared that it would get worse, which is happening right now. It is getting worse for women. And this is 2 decades of progress that women in Afghanistan fought for. It was their activism that made it possible for them to get access to education, to get jobs, to be part of the parliament, to be part of everyday public life. And suddenly that public life is taken from them, that women are erased from the public life in Afghanistan.
Malala highlights the severity of this issue succinctly. Keeping women from obtaining higher education is taking their public life away from them. When you remove someone's access to education, you're effectively removing their ability to participate fully in society. Education gives us the knowledge, the skills that we need to contribute to our societies. And without it, these Afghan women, they're being silenced and stripped of opportunities for advancement, self-sufficiency, and independence. And as if that wasn't bad enough, women in Afghanistan have also been banned from so many other things, including speaking in public spaces.
We have to talk about what is going on in Afghanistan right now, because women just got another right taken away from them. The Talib seized power 3 years ago, and ever since then they have created countless new laws, most of which are limiting women's access to anything and everything. But their newest law forbids women from using something that we all kind of take for granted: their voices in public, because they now deem that women's voices are considered too intimate to be heard out loud. So talking too loudly, reciting, reading out loud is not allowed in public. Women should not be seen or heard in public. That is basically the gist of it. The seen part they have already established, since every woman has to be covered up from top to bottom. Women should also not be allowed out without a male relative by their side. Like a little dog that's not allowed to go out without their owner, right? It's only that women even have less rights than dogs, because dogs can bark without being punished. If a woman is too loud, she will be punished.
Thankfully, women are not backing down, and they are still protesting so that they can receive their higher education. And along with that, men are also speaking up against this inhumane ban. The video reads, an Afghan professor tears up his diplomas on live TV to protest the ban on women attending university. And you can tell from the video that he's really nervous, literally shaking while doing it. He's probably terrified of the repercussions. But when good men do nothing, they're just as complicit as the bad men doing the bad thing, okay? In itself, Islam is a beautiful religion, as are many religions. The problem is we're allowing bad men with bad intentions to interpret these religions for women. Case in point, this Muslim brother who says women's education is ruining Muslim women and making them unmarriageable. Like, to who? Or are you becoming increasingly unmarriageable to these educated women? Like, food for thought, okay? Like, it's giving extinction burst behavior. And if you're confused about what that means, it means you missed class. So check out that class if you missed it. On a more somber note, let's talk about the Kolkata case. In India, women's right to education is also under threat in a case that shook not only the country, but the world. In what eventually became known as the Kolkata case,
she was taking a nap at the hospital while she was on call. The hospital didn't have any call rooms, so she was sleeping in a classroom. And that's where they found her the next morning. Her last diary entry before her shift, according to her father, was about her aspiration to be a top performer on her medical exams. Trigger warning here, because I'm going to talk about the autopsy results. According to the autopsy, her thyroid cartilage would...
You can watch that on your own time, but you know how people say that, like,
oh, like only animals would do that. These men are animals. They're animals.
No. Animals are better than that. Animals would, like, unalive you so they would survive. But not like this. No, this is like human. This is like human, okay? Don't get animals into this. In an interview with Al Jazeera, Mumida's aunt shared that her niece was aiming for a gold medal in her medical degree. And it's just so sad that someone who was pursuing their dream of becoming a great doctor, save all these lives, could meet such a horrible fate. Now, following the gruesome crime, doctors, nurses, and students took to the streets to demand justice. And this protest in Kolkata not only demands justice for Mumita Debnath, but also sends the message that enough is enough. Women have just as much right to be educated, to become doctors, to live. Okay, these people out on the streets, they're not just fighting for the memory of their colleague, they're also standing up for every single girl and woman who has faced threats of violence and actual violence from the men around them, especially when they are in spaces of higher education. They're fighting for every woman's right to live and learn without fear. And as these men and women demanded justice, another layer comes up. Men, not just in Kolkata, but across India, they have been protesting against women's colleges, even going so far as using threats of violence to intimidate women who just want to pursue their education.
These men climbed the wall of a female-only college to harass women. Men can be seen scaling the walls of one of India's oldest universities. Many young women said they were physically harassed by men who were allegedly drunk and chanted, "Miranda IP dono hamara," referring to this and another women's college where a similar incident took place last year. The men claimed ownership of both. Indraprasth College for Women's administration responded by locking up the women in the hostels. But many are now protesting against the administration for failing to stop the men and restricting them instead. And this isn't the first time. Such incidents are common in the 101-year-old Delhi University's history. I know because I studied there over a decade ago. In a city notorious for being incredibly unsafe for women, the larger Delhi University campus is a daily battleground for women. In 2007, the year I joined Delhi University for my undergrad, a mob of men mass molested women students of Indraprasth College, with cops watching helplessly nearby. Some of the men in the mob were in the vicinity to take tests to join India's police force. In recent years, the aggression against women has escalated. In 2018, men threw semen-filled balloons at students of other women's colleges. In 2020, dozens of men broke into Gargi College and molested young women. For decades, college and hostel administrations have been restricting women's movements in response to these threats. My hostel curfew over a decade ago was 7 p.m. Today, some women's colleges impose curfews at 5 p.m. Delhi University has instituted a panel to investigate security lapses at Indraprasth College, but students demand that the administration be held accountable instead of locking up women in their rooms.
I mean, it's horrifying. Now, I know what some of you might be thinking, like, oh, that only happens in certain places, certain communities, certain societies. Could never be me, not in my white Christian neighborhood. Well, I hate to burst your bubble, but it just isn't true. Last April, Wired released an article that follows Stanford geologist Jane Willenbring, who at the time was just 22 years old. Willenbring, according to writer David Kushner, had just arrived to start her master's in earth science at Boston University. As an undergrad with an oboe scholarship at North Dakota University, she had studied beetle fossils found in Antarctica, learning that the now frozen continent once pooled with freshwater lakes. And according to Willenbring, this information seemed really important for future global climate change. So in Antarctica, Willenbring studies under one of the more renowned geologists. Let's get into some context. A report released in August 2022 by the National Science Foundation, the main agency funding Antarctic research, found that 59% of women at McMurdo and other field stations run by the US Antarctic program said they'd experienced sexual harassment or assault. I mean, any percentage is bad, obviously, but 59%, more than half. And to think that that figure is just for the women who reported, okay, I think it's a safe bet to say that 59% is underreported, which begs the question, what is the true rate? Is it 80, 90? Okay, these numbers are telling me and all the other women that going on an Antarctic expedition is a surefire way to be sexually harassed, that putting yourself in an isolated setting with no escape with men is a fast track to hell. And sadly, on some level, we already know this. It's why the oil rig prank became so popular. And for those who don't know, there's this prank circulating on TikTok a few months back. And in the prank, the women would call their parents, specifically their dads, to announce that they got a job at an internship or an oil rig. And these parents' reactions just tell us everything we need to know. Like, they're scared for their daughter's safety around men when there's no easy escape. You're stuck in that ship. You're stuck in that rig. for God knows how long. Okay? On some level, we know that being a woman in an isolated setting surrounded by men with minimal contact to the outside world and having all these power imbalances is simply not conducive to a safe and unbothered way of living for a woman. We as women know this, and men know this. So let's get into this a little bit because this is a theme that will show up throughout the class. It is so messed up that women think twice about reporting the injustices that they face because they know that they won't be met with empathy. Some women don't want to speak up about their negative experiences in close quarters with men because they're scared that people will view their experiences as proof that women shouldn't be in these spaces in the first place.
That's why women weren't allowed there in the first place, because they're gonna get essayed.
So a lot of women are scared to say the quiet part out loud because they believe that speaking up about these things will take away opportunities for other women in the future. That speaking up about being harassed in the workplace, in academia, or in field research, or in medical school means that you have failed as an empowered woman in male-dominated spaces. You have failed progress, you have failed womanhood. But that's not on you, okay? You didn't fail, they failed you. Like, these people who attack women in these spaces, they can't fathom being on equal footing with a woman in the workplace. Okay, that's on them and their insecurities. That's on them and their need for violence. Like, why are they so violent? Okay, that's not on you. So carrying the burden of all of that is not your task. Okay, that is so embarrassing for them, not for you. So now let's get into the media examples of women being policed out of education. In the book Lessons in Chemistry, which was set in the early 1960s, the protagonist gets essayed by her professor, but she ends up getting away because she punctures him with a pencil. Now, that's why, if you're familiar with the TV adaptation on Apple TV, as well as the book's cover, the pencil in her hair is so symbolic because she literally used it as a defense tool. She literally owes her life to that pencil. Throughout the book, the protagonist meets another woman who had to quit higher education and academia altogether because of the same reason. Women are literally getting assaulted and harassed in pursuit of their dreams, their degrees, their doctorates, their freedom, their independence, their knowledge. And there are numbers to back this up. The Campus Safety magazine mentions 3 studies that reveal just how prevalent sexual harassment is within academic institution. One study in the Journal of Interpersonal Violence found that up to 50% of female undergraduate students have experienced sexual harassment during college. The National Academies of Sciences, Engineering, and Medicine reported that over 58% of female faculty and staff members have experienced some form of sexual harassment throughout their careers. And even more alarmingly, the Pennsylvania State University system found that 19% of undergraduate students reported experiencing sexual harassment from faculty or staff. And while social movements such as #MeToo show that we are making strides in our fight to hold these people accountable, academics have noticed that post-MeToo, there has been a drop in mentorship for female faculty and students. A lot of male managers, they've become hesitant to mentor female colleagues because they're worried about being accused of inappropriate behavior. In fact, about 60% of male managers now feel uncomfortable having one-on-one mentoring sessions with women, especially behind closed doors or outside of the office. RMIT University's Professor Andrew R. Timming found women may be missing out on these opportunities due to fears by male managers of potential misconduct allegations. Workplace relations between male and females have changed over the past 2 years. Male managers are significantly less likely than female managers to mentor or interact one-on-one with female employees. We found that male managers were less likely to work one-on-one in an office with a door closed and less likely to have a late-night dinner with female employees. The thing is that many women still want that mentorship from senior colleagues who usually turn out to be male so that they can grow in their careers. So it's like we took a step forward, but we also took a step back. But as always, the fight goes on. And the good news is that the world is slowly learning to listen. These allegations fueled a congressional investigation into sexual misconduct across all US-funded Antarctic research programs. An article on eLearn College reads, "Witnesses at the congressional hearing painted a bleak picture. Women recounted how pleas for help went unanswered, how whispers of mistreatment were dismissed as mere gossip. They felt trapped in a system that prioritized preserving reputations and funding over protecting its most vulnerable members. The hearing marked a watershed moment, a recognition that taxpayer dollars could not be used to subsidize oppression. Wallenbring, who offered her own testimony in a congressional hearing in 2023, stated, "The response of both the National Science Foundation and Boston University to my harassment was to minimize it. They tried to sweep it under the rug, silence me, and prevent me from collaborating with other scientists." And this silencing that women experience whenever they bring up injustices they face in education and male-dominated spaces in general is exactly why women do not want to report what these men did to them. So now the question is why? Why don't men want women to pursue higher learning or learning, period? Why is there such a big push to prevent women from educating themselves and sharing their knowledge with others? It's because we're in a mating crisis. In 2023, a TikTok user discusses the mating crisis that is being driven by women getting more college degrees than men. And before we get into this, I wanted to pull up the numbers really quickly. So according to the Wall Street Journal, women made up 59% of college students at the end of the 2020-21 school year. And this year, there are 2.4 million more female than male undergraduates on US campuses. And also, an NYU professor warned that beyond the classroom, the gap is causing an existential threat to society, and that we are creating a dangerous cohort. We have mating inequality in the country, he said, adding that women with college degrees don't want to partner with men who don't hold a degree. The most dangerous person in the world is a broke and alone male, and we are producing too many of them. He said the most unstable, violent societies in the world all have one thing in common: young, depressed men who aren't attaching to work, aren't attaching to school, and aren't attaching to relationships. And there you have it. The war on women's education boils down to entitlement to women's bodies, and anything that reduces access to women's bodies as public or private property must be abolished as per the rules of below bare minimum effort men. And in this day and age, it's women's education. And the scary part is that limiting education doesn't just keep women from careers, it keeps us out of public life altogether. It makes it harder for us to speak up and participate in decision making, decisions that impact our communities, our lives, our futures. The war on women's education is a slippery slope that can lead to women being pushed out of public spaces entirely and into the hands of below bare minimum low effort men. For so long, women have been pushed out of education and higher learning, and now that we are back in business, we are once again facing adversity. And yeah, I say that we are now back in business because, as it turns out, 100% entire full shade to this man who misinterprets the Quran to benefit his misogynistic agenda. A Muslim woman, to be exact, named Fatima Al-Firi founded the first known university more than 1,000 years ago in Fez, Morocco. Here's her story. Upon the death of her father, Fatima inherited a large fortune. She invested this wealth in founding a mosque and educational institution for the benefit of her local community. Gradually, the establishment blossomed into the University of Al-Qarawiyyin, named after Fatima's birthplace, Kairouan in Tunisia. Established in the year 859, the University of Al-Qarawiyyin was the first degree-granting educational institute in the world as recognized by UNESCO and Guinness World Records. Students from all over the world traveled to study a wide range of subjects, ranging from natural sciences to languages to astronomy, and Fatima herself studied there too. During the medieval times, the university was considered a major intellectual center. So, if you have ever felt out of place in school or in college, in places of higher learning, don't be. You have just as much right to be there as anybody else, if not more. Bestie, wake up.